I will quickly move on now to someone who's a great favorite of women peace builders, Professor Happymon Jacob. And thank you so much. I know you have another meeting to catch, so I will request your indulgence to stay for a little longer. He's a professor of diplomacy and disarmament at the School of International Studies, Jawaharlal Nehru University, and founder and honorary director, Council for Strategic and Defense Research. He held teaching positions at the University of Jammu and Jamia Millia, and also at the Center for Air Power Studies and Delhi Policy Group, the Observer Research Foundation. He's an elected member of the Pugwash Council. He has written extensively, especially from zones of conflict, including Kashmir and the India-Pakistan imbroglio. He hosts a weekly video show on national security, and it's quite fascinating to hear that. And significantly, he has never invited a woman to be on that panel. He's passionate about breaking down the walls between policy and scholarship and bringing together academia and practice. And so, given your extensive experience, Professor Jacob, in IR, may we request you to make a brief intervention to share your perspective on the state of so-called gender right streaming in peace and security studies, both as well as on the ground. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Dr. Gopinath. As I can see, I'm probably the odd man out on the panel, so if I say something silly, you should forgive me. It's good to see you, Ambassador Marisa Basupuri. I'll sort of begin I know I have just 5 minutes that you've given me. I'll begin my remarks with a few conversations that I had recently. One was with a woman sniper in Kyiv. I was there in Kyiv in September. So I was talking to her, and she said, this is an unnecessary war, but my country, my nationality, and my national pride is under threat. So I fight the Russians like my male colleagues. It's a life choice. Then I went to Russia. I was in Russia in October. I went to St. Petersburg, met a feminist colleague of mine. She teaches at the university. She said, this is an unfortunate war that shouldn't have happened in the first place. But now that it has happened, Russia must win this at any cost. I'm personally against the war, but I can't see my country lose. My son is 17, supports the war, and will be drafted into the military next year. I'm sad about it. My husband is totally against the war. I think both these statements are pretty nuanced. I think what stood out for me from the statement of the sniper was that this was a life choice, that I'm like my male counterparts. I work alongside with them. I think what stood out from the Russian statement was that she's conflicted about the war, that she's far more nuanced about the conduct of the war and how it's going. What I really want to talk about are three things. One, that when it comes to women and war, women are not only victims of war and peace advocates. Like most wars, the war on Ukraine has once again shown that approaching women and war through the lens of victimhood is not useful and sometimes even incorrect. So thinking about women and their stance as anti-war only doesn't do justice to the cause of women at all. For example, Ukrainian women have actively participated in the country's military efforts, making up 22% of the national army. Far greater than any other country. Almost 60,000 women are part of the Ukrainian army, of which about 5,000 serve in combat units, front lines, in various capacities. Several Ukrainian women have also taken advocacy roles in media and diplomacy and all of the rest. So I think, as MG pointed out, deductive notions about women, I think, are simply not helpful. Women are combatants, women support war efforts, they are diplomats representing countries at war, etc., etc., etc. And may I say that this does not contradict the reality that women are also victims of gender-based violence, trafficking, etc. But being aware of this innocent looking binary is very important, that women are X and not Y. I think that, in my opinion, is simply not going to be helpful. Not just that it is not helpful, it actually keeps women away from the high tables of power politics, as it were. My second point is connected to this, and that is the traditional security conversations tend not to recognize women as individuals with a geopolitical agency. Right? It is important to emphasize that men are not the only actors in security and foreign policy fields, whether playing a negative role or playing a positive role. If we don't account for the roles that women play in contributing to violence, hypernationalism, and wars, it would be easy to advocate a role for, it would not be easy to advocate a role for women in high politics by merely highlighting women as victims, do-gooders, and peace advocates. I think the reality is far more complicated than that. I mean, the Ambassador Marisa did talk about, a peace agreement which includes women is 35% more likely to last and at least 15 years. I completely, that's what the data shows. So I don't disagree with that at all, that women do bring a certain nuanced approach to war and violence, and that has its importance. But I don't want to take away the geopolitical agency of women, which are, I think, applicable in all sort of areas. It's not really black and white, if you ask me. So should women have separate peace tracks? Again, a question that is asked in the concept note. As again, MG pointed out a very interesting point. It's not about women addressing women's issues alone. That is really not the point. The camaraderie is important. But in my own experience of conducting practice for so many years, my own feeling is that it is important to have women part of the conversation rather than having a separate track where women talk to other women. My final point really is that the relative absence of women in spheres of security and defense is also a function of how we define security and defense, right? It's a definitional problem. Traditional notions of national security, by definition, is not inclusive, not democratic, and not expansive. So as I said, it's not about women, it's about definitions. Definitions like theories are created by someone for some specific purpose in certain contexts. So I think our target must to be in demolishing our own definitions and theories about security, about defense, and issues of that kind. So, I mean, I've been a teacher for so many years, so I must say something to the young students present here. And my only piece of advice really is that don't let definitions, because definitions are important, take over your life choices or careers. Take over definitions and redefine. Definitions are important, theories are important. So I conclude by saying that, as going back to wise Dr. Meenakshi Gopinath, adding women into the mix and stirring is not the answer. And again, as you said, women addressing women's issues alone in a separate room is not also the answer. I think what needs to be done is to change the substance and the agenda. Changing the definitions is important. I mean, I'll end with one quick sentence. I've been a teacher for so many years, and in my national security class in JNU, the best students are women. And when they come to PhD or when you go to the think tanks, you suddenly wonder what happened to those women. Where do all those smart kids disappear? I think the precast definitions about what women should do, who they are, where they belong, it take over at some point of time, and they tend to disappear. I think that's a pity. Thank you so much for the invitation.
Thank you very much, Professor Jacob, spoken like both an academic and a wise strategist on international affairs. You're absolutely right. I think reductivist stereotyping can be more harmful than helpful. And I'm sure you're familiar with that famous book, Mothers, Monsters, and Whores, which really talks about the role of women, active role that women play in fueling conflict, like the Minister for Women's Welfare in Rwanda and Vijana Plavskik in Serbia, how they were really indicted for war crimes. And of course, we all know about the women of Guantanamo Bay. So you're absolutely right that we cannot look at women as women, as you know, wholly, only peaceful and passively holy. And the woman in white is now a very unacceptable kind of image. And so thank you ever so much, and thank you for pointing out that 60,000 women are there in the Ukraine army. I mean, I'm sure many others knew it, but I didn't know, in combat operations.